Hi everybody. I'm assuming that we're live and you guys can see me and hear me. Hope everybody's doing well. I know that I talked to you yesterday and we talked about the difficulty of training under these conditions, and that there are things that you can do in your own home that allow you to do something that's useful for paddling and feel good about that. That's good for your mental and emotional health as well as your paddling. So what I'd like to do today is introduce to you the concept of land drills. I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about technique first, and then share with you how I discovered land drills and what their value is, and then I'll introduce to you the ones that I'm going to talk about in this coming week. I won't actually get to doing a land drill with you this week, simply because, well, for three reasons. One is because it takes a little time, and I don't want these videos to drag on too long. I'd rather do more shorter ones than one super long one. The second reason is I think I might need to stretch this material out for a while, because I suspect that we're going to be living like this for a while. I think this is our new normal for the next month anyway, so why not stretch things out a little bit? And then the third reason is I live in a small house, and I actually am trying to figure out how I can best do the drills. I need a little bit of room, and I'm filming these on my own. I've got an iPad on a tripod, and it's kind of hard to move around and do the drills and know that I'm always in the frame. So I've got to get that sorted out, and I'll try to rehearse that a little bit tonight. I may end up going outside to do them. It's supposed to be a nice day tomorrow, and if that's the case, then I'll go outside and try to do them out there where there's more room, but it's always going to be a challenge to stay in the frame. So bear with me on the technical side of things, and bear with me for the fact that you're not actually going to see the first drill today. You'll have to wait till tomorrow. One thing I would like to say is that please feel free to ask questions. I won't get to them during the actual video, because I find it's the first time that I've done this type of thing, yesterday and today, and I find it a little awkward talking to a camera as opposed to people, and trying to stay in frame and keep my train of thought and everything else is a bit distracting. So I'm not seeing the questions as you ask them live, but I will go back and respond to any questions that you do ask after the video is over. So feel free to ask any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. And then when we actually start doing the drills, what I invite you to do is, if you want, you can send a picture of yourself doing the drills, and I can comment and give you feedback on whether you're actually in the right position and whether you're doing them correctly. And again, that won't happen live, but I'll do that after the fact. So yeah, so onward and upward for today. What I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit first about paddle technique, and then we'll get into the drills that support good paddle technique. So my take on technique is that there's not one particular way to paddle. We're all different. We're all different shapes and sizes. We're different heights. We're different weights. Some people are very strong. Some people aren't so strong, but they have really well-developed aerobic systems. We all approach how we paddle differently. Some people like to paddle with a fast cadence, a fast stroke rate. Other people like to paddle with a much heavier gear with a slower stroke rate, much more power on each stroke. Neither one of those is incorrect. It really depends on what is right for the individual. And so the key really is to focus on 5 fundamental things when you're paddling. Try to do them really well, and find the way that works best for you to do it, and do those things. And if you can do them well, then you're paddling well. Where a coach starts to critique somebody's actual movements is where they struggle with doing those 5 fundamental things. And then you start troubleshooting, and then you can start looking at the way somebody stands on a board, the way they're holding their paddle, their paddle angle at entry, the hand positions, how much they're using their legs, how much they're bending over, all those kind of things. But to get into those things and tell somebody to paddle a particular way, to me, seems foolish. I mean, just look around. if you consider the way I paddle, consider the way Seychelles paddles, Danny Ching, Connor Baxter, Michael Booth, Casper Steinfath, everybody paddles differently. They paddle in a way that works best for them. And to expect that somebody is going to be an exact copy or should try to exactly copy the technique of another person, I think is a mistake. I think you need to try to do basic things well. You can look to other paddlers and how they do these things, and you can try what they do, but really you're trying to do 5 fundamental things and do them well in a way that works best for you with the toolkit or the skills and the physical structure that you have. So let's talk about those 5 things. And I'm going to move around now, so hopefully I can stay in the frame. The first thing is that when you're paddling, what allows us to move whatever craft we're in forward through the water is, and by the way, this is my old C1 paddling canoe. It's just a little easier to use inside this room here. The first thing is that when we're paddling, we reach forward, we gather water on our paddle blade as we enter the water, and we hold that water on our paddle blade and make our paddle sort of stick in position, and then we pull ourselves by the paddle. And as the paddle gets close to our body, we're actually pushing ourselves past the paddle. That's what we should be doing to try to move forward. And that is true for virtually every paddle sport, whether you're paddling on a stand-up paddleboard, a sprint canoe, sprint kayak, surf ski, a one-man outrigger canoe, whatever it is, it's the same principle. You reach forward, gather water on the face of your blade, hold it there, secure your paddle in place, pull yourself to the paddle, and then actually push yourself past the paddle. And the degree to which you're able to do that well is going to determine how fast you end up going. Okay, so that's the first most important thing. The second thing is that we want to use big muscles preferentially over small muscles. So what that means is we really want to try to use the biggest muscles available in the position that we are in our paddlecraft. For people on stand-up paddleboards, because we're standing, it allows us to use our legs and it allows us to use our hips. And we should be striving to use our legs and our hips more than we probably already do, because they are the biggest muscles in our body. The muscles of our legs, again, I'm going to try to stay in the frame as I stand up. The muscles in our legs, our quads, our hamstrings, our glutes, they're the biggest muscles in our body. The more that we can use those muscles as we're paddling, the better off we're going to be. Our hips, it's the most heavily muscled joint in the human body. It's got the muscles of the legs crossing the hips, and then all the muscles in your core cross your hips as well. So there's more muscle to use in your hip joint than anywhere else. So we got to try to find a way to engage our hips when we're paddling too. In contrast, the muscles of our arms and even the muscles in our upper body are smaller in comparison. And I think that it's worth considering our arms and even the muscles in our upper body as being simply connectors that connect our big muscles, our hips and our legs, to the water that we have loaded on our blades. So we have water gathered on our blade and our blade stuck in position. And our upper body, our arms, they're just connectors. And even our back, our lats and our upper body, they're just connectors that are connecting our hips and our legs to the water that's loaded on the blade. If we can think about using big muscles preferentially over small muscles, we're going to do a lot better. And then the other thing too is that we want to, when we're paddling, be conscious of what muscles we're using and when. At certain times in the stroke, you use certain muscles more than others. And so you really want to think about using muscles only when you need to use them, and then relaxing them when you don't need them. So in the recovery phase of the stroke, when you're coming back through the air and the blade's not in the water, you want everything relaxed as much as possible. When the blade's gathering water and in the water, you really want to have muscles engaged and contracted only to the degree that they need to be. And only those really, the muscles that are providing all the power should be the ones that are really contracted. The other ones can be more relaxed. Obviously you want to relax the muscles in your face. If you've got a real grimace on your face when you're paddling, that's not helping you. Those muscles, if they're contracted, are going to need oxygen, and they're going to divert oxygen from the muscles that are supplying power that for paddling, for the sake of paddling well and fast, need that oxygen more. So not only do you want to use big muscles preferentially over small muscles, but you want to relax the muscles that you don't need and only contract the muscles that you do need at the moment that you need them. The third thing, the third basic fundamental is we want to use body weight as much as we can in our stroke. So I'll stand up again. Body weight is, I'm actually going to use my sup paddle here. Body weight helps us in two ways. The first way is that when we're getting the blade in the water and we're loading the blade during a stroke, if we can pile some body weight onto the paddle, that's going to add to what we're doing with our muscles. There's the force of gravity, which is, we can use the force of gravity and how it acts on our body weight to add load to the paddle and add to what we're doing with our muscles or make it easier for our muscles. The second thing is that if I'm standing on my paddleboard and I'm just standing on it, I weigh 185 pounds. That's 185 pounds of weight displacing, like stacked on my paddleboard, displacing water, sinking my board deeper into the water. If I can get some of my 185 pounds off the board and onto the paddle, so now I'm leaning on my paddle, some of the weight that was on the board is coming off the board and it's going onto my paddle. So my board is actually going to come up in the water a little bit. And if you want to see the impact of that, stand in your bathroom scale with your paddle. I could put it in the middle of the floor here and I could stand on it and it would read 185 pounds, I guess, plus the weight of the paddle. And then I could lean off the scale and onto my paddle and the scale is going to read less. Okay, so the degree to which you can get weight off your board and onto your paddle is going to lighten the weight on the board. It's going to cause the board to sit a little higher in the water, and that's going to help it skip across the water more easily. It's going to reduce the resistance to forward movement through the water. And our objective really should be to pull ourselves past our paddle, and it should also be to get the board up on top of the water and just skittering across the surface of the water where there's less resistance created by the water to the board moving through the water because it's up skipping across the surface. And so getting body weight off the board is really helpful for that, okay? So the third basic fundamental is use our body weight. The fourth is that we want to use positive blade angle as much as possible, okay? So this is positive angle, okay? Where the blade is further in front of you than your top hand is, or than the handle of the paddle is. Okay, that's positive angle. This is vertical or neutral, and then back here is negative. And we want to spend as much time in this range here from positive to vertical, and as little time back here as possible. I put accelerometers on sprint racing canoes and paddleboards, and they've generated a curve that shows the acceleration that occurs during the stroke. And acceleration starts when the blade enters the water and begins gathering water in the blade, and it very quickly rises to a point where it maxes out when the blade's vertical. So the acceleration is rapidly increasing from entry to when the blade's vertical. And then when the blade goes through vertical and starts to go negative, your board is still accelerating, but it's accelerating at a rapidly diminishing rate. So the acceleration curve is rapidly declining. And so you have to ask yourself, why do I want to spend a lot of time back here where the acceleration is rapidly declining when I could take the blade out and start the next stroke where I'm getting heaps of acceleration, increasing acceleration at the beginning of the stroke through to vertical by starting a new stroke. So you want to do as much as you can with that positive blade angle to vertical. You want to minimize the time back here. You don't need to pull it out at your feet, and I've seen people try to pull it out in front of their body, in front of their feet, and one of the problems with doing that is in order to do that well, you end up not loading the stroke as much and not getting as much body weight on the stroke. You tend to sort of not commit to the paddle as much so that you can get it out early. So I find for most people it's better to think about committing and doing that initial part of the stroke where you get all that amazing acceleration, to do that really well. And then if you go past your feet or past your body with your blade a little bit, that's okay. Just don't spend too much time back there, right? And then the last thing that's really important that everyone wants to try to do when they're paddling is to do things that maximize the run of the board between strokes. Obviously that's important because it helps you go faster, right? If you're carrying more speed between strokes, you're not slowing down. So you'll cover a given distance in a shorter period of time if you're not slowing down. Second reason it's important is if your board's not slowing down between strokes, then there's less work to do at the beginning of the next stroke to get the board back up to speed, right? It didn't slow down as much. And so one of the most important things that you can do when you get to the exit of your stroke, where you're starting to finish your stroke, is make sure you do a good job of bringing your hips, reloading your hips forward underneath your body and pushing with your hips, so you're actually pushing yourself past the paddle and then getting the paddle out, and doing that as opposed to finishing your stroke, staying down, taking the blade out of the water, and then bringing your hips forward and standing up straight. Okay? The first thing I demonstrated, pulling your hips to the paddle in the exit, and you having the hips reloading forward to the paddle and your legs straightening up, having that initiate the exit, really pushes the board forward. You will feel your board accelerate off the back of the stroke, and it will carry more speed between strokes. In contrast, if you stay down and you pull the blade out of the water and then you stand up, you're actually jerking the board backwards a little bit. And you know, you can't see it when your board's moving, but if you stand still on your board in this position and then you stand up straight, you'll see your board jerk backward. So you're actually taking something off of the acceleration that it would otherwise get off the back of the stroke, and you're causing it to not carry as much speed between strokes, okay? So those are the 5 things that we try to accomplish. And how we accomplish those things is really up to us as individuals based on the tools that we have, right? The physical tools that we have, how our body is built, and what our physical strengths and weaknesses are. So if those are the 5 things we're trying to achieve, I want to try to, with land drills, I wanted to try to find ways that I can help people understand those things on land before we even get to the water. And what I found is that if you can put your body into positions on land that you need to get on, that you need to get in on the water, it really helps you find those positions when you actually get on the water. And I found this out a long time ago when I was a kid, when I just started paddling canoe. I'm going to put my sup blade down again, and I'm going to grab my canoe paddle. So this was my canoe paddle, and quite a bit shorter than a sup blade. And what I was doing is I was learning at the time how to paddle properly. And this was in the mid-70s, and there was no video, there was no internet, there was no YouTube. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to see what the best people in the world were doing and learn from watching them. But there were magazines and there were newspapers, and there was a really top paddler in my area. His name was John Wood, and he won a silver medal at the Olympics in Montreal. He was my hero when I was a kid. And so he was in the newspaper a lot. And I clipped out all the pictures that I would ever find of him in newspapers or magazines. And I would look at them and study them. And what I'd actually do is I'd get, I put my canoe paddle down for a second, and I'm going to get a broom. And what I would do is I would get a broom and I would stand in front of my the full-length mirror at my parents' house, and I would put all the photos of John Wood down on the ground around me, and I'd actually get into the paddling position, the high kneel position. I'm just going to turn this down just a little bit so you can see the high kneel position. And so here I am in the high kneel position. All of the photos would be spread out around me, and I would actually get in front of the mirror and I'd get into the reach position that I saw John in. And I'd look at my position in the mirror, and then I would look at the picture and I would try to get in the exact position that John was in. Not just the upper body shoulder rotation, the angle of the top arm, the straight bottom arm, the grip on the paddle, but I'd look at the legs. I'd look at the hip position, how the hips were pressed forward. I'd look at the front knee position, how the weight was forward, but it was on the paddle. and I get in that exact position. And then I turn to the mirror and I look at the head-on shot, and I look at the head-on shot of John, and I'd study the head-on shot so that my paddle was vertical, which meant all my weight was on top of the paddle. It wasn't like this where I was keeping my weight inside the boat. I could see that, how my obliques on my paddling side were crunching. My hips were out to the side a little bit to help me get not only my paddle, my top hand out over the water, but to hang my whole paddling side out over the water so I could get weight on the blade. And then because it was a broom, I felt like I could actually paddle a bit because the bristles in the broom would compress a bit, and I could actually start to see how John was starting his motion. I'd look at pictures of him where he'd started to pull and he'd started to engage his hips, and I'd try to engage my hips in the pull the same way. And then I would think about the exit. I'd see the position he was in at the exit where his hips, they'd come back during the stroke, but then they had reloaded forward before he even got the blade out of the water. That reloading forward the hips initiated his exit. And so I tried to mimic everything that he did in those pictures, or that I saw him do in those pictures on land in front of my parents' mirror. And I did this regularly. And then what I would do is, when I was going down to the canoe club to paddle, I'd ride my bike, and it would take about 15 minutes, and I would visualize what I'd seen in the photos of John, what I'd seen myself do in front of the mirror, what it felt like while I was doing it, and I would imagine what it felt like and what I wanted to feel like when I got in my boat. And then when I got to the canoe club and got my boat out and put it down on the grass and set it up and was warming up, I was thinking still about what I wanted to feel like, what I felt like in front of the mirror, what I wanted to feel like when I got on the boat, what positions I wanted to feel my body get into and move through. And what happened was I would push off the dock and take my first stroke, and it would be amazing. I'd be doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I guarantee you that I was the only guy in my peer group that was doing this. The other guys would be typical 13, 14-year-old boys. They would be clowning around and only thinking about how they were paddling once they started to paddle up the river. And most of them would struggle, and they'd spend the first half of a 10-kilometer workout trying to figure out, how to paddle properly, how to feel the water. And I'd feel good right from the beginning. And so I learned at an early age the importance of doing these drills on land, putting your body into particular positions that you need to get into on the water, and allowing your body to feel what those positions are like, so that and what it's like to move through them. And it's kind of like, if you can get the proper position for the catch, if you can get the proper position for the beginning the pull and engaging your hips, if you can get the proper position for the exit, then it's it's like you have put some dots on a piece of paper now, and it's easier to connect the lines between those dots. So it's like you have points of your stroke that you want to move through. And it really made a difference back when I was in canoe. And what I found is it makes a difference in stand-up paddling too. When I'm struggling with my technique, I'll do some drills on land, and it always helps me feel better what I'm trying to do. And I've noticed when I've been running clinics or camps that the people that I share these drills with on land, it helps them as well. It helps them better understand what they're looking for when they get on their board. And the other thing that's important too is, whether you're in a canoe or whether you're standing on a paddleboard, there's a bit of a balance issue. And sometimes that balance issue inhibits you from finding the right position. But when you're on land, you can get into the right position without fearing that you're going to fall over. And then it allows you to, it's kind of like, for a lot of people, an aha moment. The light bulb goes off because they realize, oh, that's the position that he's talking about. And then they're better able to find that, or search for that and find it when they get on the water. So, I've talked quite a bit already today. I'm not sure exactly how long I've been going because I can't see the screen from here. But I'm going to leave it there. And I think I've set the stage for land drills. I'll just outline what's ahead. Tomorrow, I'm going to aim to do a drill about the catch, the position that we want to be in at the catch that allows us to get our body weight on the blade and to enter the water with all of our weight on the blade and get the blade buried as quickly as possible. So we'll do that one tomorrow. After that, we'll look at one that helps us engage the hips first, so that we end up pulling. Sorry, my head's out of the frame, but you don't really need to see my head. You end up pulling with your hips first, and your upper body follows, rather than pulling with your arms first. Okay, because remember, your arms are smaller muscles, and they should be viewed as connectors, not as the muscles that are generating force. So that will be the second thing that we'll look at. I'm going to show you, I'm going to explain another drill to you that you need a partner for. And that's a drill that I like to show people to help them understand how to better use their legs. And unfortunately, with the situation we have going on right now with COVID-19, I don't think that, A, you probably won't have somebody with you while you do this kind of thing, and B, it's going to involve holding hands to do the drill, and that's not good social distancing. So I'll explain that drill, and then you can, when all this is over, you can revisit that. And then lastly, I'll look at a drill for the exit that's going to show you how to actually be in that position where you can reload your hips forward before the blade gets out of the water. So those are the first four drills I'll show you. And then I'd also like to show you 3 drills or 3 demonstrations on land about how to track your board straight. Because when we just had our recent Paddle Monster camp in Florida, we did some work on the water about tracking your board straight, and people were successful. They did a much better job of tracking straight. By that we mean paddling on one side without having to change sides to steer. But it is difficult, if you've never been in these positions before, to do it all on the water when you're dealing with balance and that type of thing. So I can show you the theory involved with the 3 tools that you need to track your board straight, so you can paddle indefinitely on one side without having to change sides to go straight. So there'll be 3 separate episodes or drills that I'll show you for tracking your board straight as well. All right, so again, feel free to ask questions or share comments. And then when we start to get into these drills, if you can get somebody to take a picture of you when you're in the position that I'm explaining and demonstrating, please share it, post it, and I'll comment or critique on it and make sure that you're in the right position so that you get the most you possibly can out of the drill. And I know it's a poor replacement for actually being on the water for those of you that are land-bound through this this virus, but it's better than nothing, and it's surprisingly powerful if you can put your body in these positions on land, and if you can learn what it feels like and visualize what it would feel like when you're on your board. When you do get back in the water, if you've done a good job of the land drills and the visualization, I'm convinced that you will find your paddling improves. So it's like, we can't do what we want to do necessarily right now, but we can still do something constructive, and that's what I'm trying to help you with. So stay well, stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Okay? Thank you. I just have to figure out how to turn this off.